Hi, my name's Stanzie Tooth. I'm a painter and we're in my studio. For the work that's going to be in my exhibition at the Latcham Art Centre, all the work is made with ink on watercolor paper. Historically, I was trained as an oil painter. I painted in oil for about 15 years. And then I went and did a residency in Germany and ended up loving it there and moving to Germany for a few years. Germany is really known for its ink making. Started experimenting with it when I was living in Berlin and really fell in love with the material. I was doing different residencies around Europe. It was a material that was easy to travel with. When I came back to Toronto, I got pregnant, was looking for a less toxic way to make work, so started painting in ink over oil and just really fell in love with it because I was starting to work in a much more representational way. I could get finer lines, I could get more detail, and I really love the immediacy of paper. I can now just pull a piece of paper out of a drawer instead of priming a canvas for 3 days. I've always been an artist that's been really interested in color, what you can do with mixing colors, contrasting colors. And that's another thing that really drew me to ink, is that the community of ink makers is this like wild and crazy world of these like small batch productions. Inks are made out of a lot of natural dyes and different materials that come from the earth. There's all these very rich colors that come from the materials themselves. A lot of the inks that I'm using are derived from plant materials, from different rocks. It's kind of a nice bonus that it feels more connected to the imagery. For the exhibition at Latcham Art Centre, I've planned a large wall installation, which is a digital scan of one of my paintings that my husband's actually helped me to turn into a digital wallpaper. And there will be 3 life-size figures cut out of this wall of foliage. It's the first time that I'm actually doing something digital in one of my exhibitions, which is a new and kind of exciting venture. I've done a lot of site-specific murals in the past. When I went into art school, I thought I was going to go into theater design later. And I always really loved that idea of creating an environment. And then I just fell in love with painting in art school in a deeper way and realized that in painting, I can kind of create my own environments myself. Like I'm the director, I'm the set designer, I'm the actor, if you will. So in exhibitions that I've produced, I've often had these like large scale murals, and I really like how those larger pieces, sort of like a set design, ground the space and kind of implicate the viewer in a different way than if they were just encountering a regular painting. The word inheritance as a title is interesting because it has so many different kind of levels and implications to the work. Art traditions that I'm coming out of is one level. There's also this idea of the autobiographical. And so there's this complicated idea of what ownership of the land means. And then there's also this level of the world that my child will inherit from me. And then there's also this idea of ecology. As I became a parent, this idea of thinking about landscape and the implications of what I'll pass down to my son makes it even that much more complicated because of the impact we have on the earth and what we pass down to our children. So it's these levels of kind of the implication of the human presence on the landscape. My family moved from downtown Toronto to like just outside of Prince Edward County when I was 9. The land that my parents bought used to be part of a farm, and it was like a small wooded property that was kind of sold separately from the rest of the farmland around it. I grew up very connected to the place where I lived. Like I went from being a city kid to growing our own vegetables and having to pick up kindling to heat the parts of our house that were still heated by a wood stove. I literally spent all of my time there. I'm from a family of 5 kids. We didn't have a lot of money, so in the summer we were just like let loose in this land, just deal with ourselves. If I think about the history of my practice, the through line has always been kind of challenging the art historical canon of landscape painting. I always refer to this idea of like a feminist landscape. Can be a complicated thing to define, of course. It's meant kind of a more bodily experience of the landscape. Like if I think about the heroes of landscape painting, like Caspar David Friedrich and others, whose work I love, like that's part of why I went to Germany, was to look at romantic landscape painters. But it comes from this very removed, like myopic view. Like those works are about like God as the overseer and purveyor of the land, and this idea of like dominance and ownership over the land. For me, this connection to landscape is a much more like lived, bodily felt experience. So much of like the feminist art that I studied and that I love, like I think of people like Anna Mendieta, it's about the body and connecting the body to the landscape. Like we aren't removed, we aren't in power over it, we are connected to it. And the work that I've been making lately, showing these figures that are in black and white in contrast to these colorful landscapes. In many of the works, the figures are engulfed in leaves, in foliage, but they're drained of color. It's this attempt to show this kind of complicated relationship with the land where I both revere it, I think it's beautiful, I want to capture its beauty, I want to show that I'm connected to it, but also to show the impact that we are having this effect, that we are like a draining presence on the landscape. There's that ecological bent to it, but I also think that we preserve that which we revere, that which we find beautiful. So I think it's really interesting to have that contrast of like the beautiful and the complicated. I love the group of 7. I love their work. None of their work is peopled, or very few of their works have images of people in them. So there's this, again, this sense of like awe, but a sense of remove. So it's always been important to me to kind of have the figural presence in the space. I'm not working from references, making things up based on like remembered plants from the areas where I grew up. But some of the spaces and some of the paintings do come from art historical work. Actually, the Foundation series, some of which will be in the Latcham exhibition, was based on the Primavera by Botticelli. I went to see that in Florence and was completely stunned by it, by all of its detail. And that idea of like the foot of the main kind of protagonist in that painting, like entering this like lush ground, was something that kind of sparked a lot of this body of work in particular. This is actually one of the most direct references. This is from a Vuillard painting, and the figures and like the scene are represented pretty true to the original painting. And it's not something that I often do, but I just love this painting so much, and like these very odd patterns and color combinations that he used, sort of odd light sources in the back of his painting, and I saw them as skulls, and I just had this impulse to recreate them. Those archetypal images from art historical works come into play often because I do like how making references to those art historical pieces sets the work in a history of painting. So, I mean, thinking about my role in this work and like whether or not these paintings are like a direct autobiography or if they're archetypes, I think they're kind of both in a way. And in some of the newer work, I did go into it kind of thinking about failing my husband, my son, and myself in these pieces. That's one thing that I appreciate about these works is like with the black and white, it's easier to kind of remove some of the personal identifiers from people. Like my husband's mixed race, I'm white, our son is an amalgam of things. Being that they're drained of color, they do end up becoming kind of stand-ins. A lot of the sentiment of a portrait, a lot of the sweetness and like tenderness of a portrait is built into it without there being any kind of features in it. I guess the black and white is a way to kind of like, while it's personal, it implicates everyone in a way. So they're both connected and disconnected. And I think that's important because of the way we exist in the world. We set ourselves apart from nature, like we're of nature, but we're destroying nature. Kind of push and pull is important for me. I think that's what I've always been kind of seeking in the work, is to kind of show that impulse in me where it's like I feel very connected to nature in a way, but I feel very disconnected from it. Like I grew up very close to nature, but again, now I live in a city, so I have that sense memory of that connection, but now I live apart from it. So my son was born May of 2020. So we're 2 months into the pandemic. I'd done the last part of my pregnancy like deep in lockdown. And it was very isolating, as you can imagine. But it was just like my husband, my son, and myself, and trying to figure out parenthood while in this space of a lot of uncertainty. And so I would put him to bed every night and then just start making work. That was my waking life for a while. And our only kind of refuge during that period was escaping to my parents' property in the woods. And then like in the early months, I would just like have these crises where I'm like, I feel so separated from my work. I'm so tired. I can't even imagine ever painting again. And it was very hard to deal with. I mean, I'm very lucky that I have a super supportive partner, my husband, who was just like, it's such a big part of you. You will get back to it. This is just a weird time. I tried to make it as low stakes, and paper was good that way too. I could just pull a piece of paper out of a drawer and it felt very low pressure. My sense of time is so different now, but I find that I'm getting even more work done because I'm so much more conscious with my time. I think I'm lucky the generation that I'm in. Like my mother's generation, it's like you had to like commit to work, you had to commit to being a mother. My mom had 5 kids and therefore was a stay-at-home mom. And I think always felt that like push and pull. And I do too, like as a working mom. Whenever I'm here, I feel guilty that I'm not home, but whenever I'm there, I'm like, oh, I'm not getting enough work done. So it's always this push and pull. I think that's always going to be a thing. I think that being a mother makes me a better artist, and being an artist that has like a sense of commitment to making things makes me a better mother too. So yeah. I know a lot of women, like mother artists, who make like amazing work, and if anything, I feel like their work has blossomed a lot since having a child. It just puts you in a different sense of time and connection to things.